Hello and welcome to The Majority Show. I'm Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist show. I am your host, Mark Devlin, and I'm here tonight with my co-hosts, Mary Devlin and David Griffiths.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
We've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight because we know it was a big day. So what are you going to be talking about?
Tonight, I will be exposing yet another in a long list of big nationalist lies.
And I'll be talking about a really good conference I went to at the weekend where we talked about education, not indoctrination.
And of course, we'll all be talking about today's Supreme Court judgment. So we'll be back in just a few seconds. Right, welcome back to The Majority Show. We've got a lot of viewers today, I suppose. People are very interested in the topic of the day. But first, we're going to talk about a few things. For the majority, we are doing a new fundraising drive that some of you may have seen. Our target is to get 200 people to pledge between £5 and £10 a month so that we can amplify your voice throughout 2023. One of the things we noticed is really disheartening to see liars and people who, just put out propaganda, nationalist propaganda like Wings for Scotland. They just did a fundraiser, raised £5,000 a month in just a few days. We should be able to do that. And because, it's important to fight lies and propaganda. We do a lot of stuff here. Billboard campaigns, articles, memes and social media. We've got 50,000 followers, and we work almost full time on the majority. So, if you can, please pledge a monthly or one-time donation at our website. I'm going to show you a picture of that, what it looks like. Here it is there, donate to the majority. Go to our website, up top there's a donate button, and you will be led to this page. Everything helps. Even just £5 pounds a month is a big help for us. Right, what's next?
It all adds up. So you can also buy a T-shirt or a mug from our store. They're all at reasonable prices, and a little bit of the sale from each one goes to support the show.
And this particular mug is full of nationalist tears.
Lovely.
It's overflowing.
As always, we would just like to thank our friends at UK Union Voice, United Against Separation, for supporting the show by letting us broadcast directly to their Facebook pages, from where I know many of you are watching right now. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. And if you can, please subscribe to our show on YouTube. You'll get alerts, and once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we will be able to get more exposure on the YouTube algorithm. We're over 600 right now, so every single one helps.
And of course, as we always say, wherever you are, please like, share, comment, tell friends, crucially, extend the reach of the show at the touch of one button.
And as always, I'll be doing the comments tonight. So if I look as if I'm always doing something else, that's because I am. So please keep the comments short, and I'll try to get as many of them up on screen as I can. Thank you. They're pouring in already.
Great. Okay, coming up, we'll be talking about the big nationalist lie of the week. I'm pretty sure many of you already know what that is. Mary's going to be talking about education, not indoctrination. And of course, there'll be a bunch of Zoomers. All that and much more in just a second. Right, so first we have a little bit of majority news. This morning I was in Julia Hartley Brewer, so I can never really say that, before the Supreme Court announcement discussing the upcoming judgment. And there was an interesting part in it when she said that she wouldn't like the way she would vote if the entire UK got a vote on Scottish independence. I'll show you the clip now. Clear, and says that decisions like that should be left to Westminster.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it? A decision about what's devolved, so healthcare, education and things like that, that is a matter for the devolved government led by Nicola Sturgeon. But as you say, the decision for Scotland to leave the UK is a UK-wide matter, and I wouldn't mind it if we all got a vote. I know how I'd vote, and it might not make you very happy.
Well, I mean, sometimes people say that, I think, and I understand, I've heard you say that before, but I don't understand why anyone would give Nicola Sturgeon exactly what she wanted. and then why you would want to break up the UK. We have break up territorial integrity, our social fabric, our economic security, and our military security. So I think it really is a matter for everyone in the UK.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
Right, well, there you have it. This is a common trope that we see amongst English commentators, that they should let Scotland go because they only see Sturgeon complaining. And as I said to her, well, why on earth would you give Nicola Sturgeon exactly what she wants? Her plan seems to be to annoy the English so much that they'll give in. So if you are in England and watching this, please tell your friends to watch us next week. But also, please don't be taken in by this idea. She wants to annoy you so that then you go, let Scotland go in its own way, and then she gets what she wants. Now, what we want instead is we need your support. We need your support to get rid of Sturgeon, and then we can all be together in the UK without Sturgeon. How great is that? Okay, so
Ideal.
is ideal. So sometimes we see these kind of tropes coming out by commentators who haven't thought about Scottish issues that much, and that's why we're here, to actually get them on the right track to some extent. One other little bit of majority news was that I was also on a panel discussion last week, a few weeks ago actually, and that was I talked about it a wee bit last week. It's called Undercurrent, and we were on, it was about 7 of us, and I was the only commentator or the only person invited who was not pro-independence. The topic was, is the British state in decline? And just to show you a little clip of it, you can find it on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, there's links in the description. Because at the moment we have a situation where the money's being spent and there's all these inquiries going on, but they're all, I think most people would say these inquiries aren't coming to anything. Massive overspend on the ferries, for example, and there's been documentaries and there's been, there's this...
Surely that's a drop in the ocean compared to what the Tories have spent over
that's not, we're not talking about the Tories though, we're talking about what's happening in Scotland, right?
Sure.
We can't all blame Westminster.
I'm not blaming Westminster. So it's not unprecedented.
We can say, if you have problems here, how can you fix these problems in the system that already exists? And there are many avenues to do that. Just this kind of, I call it kind of runawayism. You kind of want to run away to this kind of utopia where everything's going to be all right. But we've seen you just pointed out all the problems of 15, 14 years of, SNP governance. Right? You think that they are going to magically improve when there's a hard border between Scotland and England? No, that's not going to happen at all. David, what do you think of that then?
I think you spoke very well there. I think you showed remarkable restraint and courage in sitting in the room with those people. I couldn't have done it. Not a chance. I couldn't have sat with those 6 people. Nonsense.
Some part of it. It was a good experience. I didn't actually know before I went in that it was going to be, they were all going to be pro-Indie. Some of course, of them. One guy, the guy Tam Laird there what do you call it? What's that word? May remember? What's his thing? Libertarian, Scottish Libertarian.
Oh, right, okay. These are the guys who don't say that they're pro or anti-independence, but
they're pro. They're pro. He wants to break the system down. Of course, Craig Murray was there as well, and it was interesting to tussle a little bit with these people.
Sure.
And I think it's actually worth. I mean, if I say so myself, I think it's worth watching to see the kind of quality of discussion that's out there. A lot of it seems very self-serving. It's like the British state is a big disaster, and the only way to solve it is to run away. Right? You're like, well, can we not just fix the problems we've got? Can we not give more accountability to the Scottish government? Can we not, not have so many scandals, stuff like that?
Yeah.
So please have a look and see what you think. Coming up in a few seconds, we are going to go into the main issue of the day. So we'll talk to you about that in a second. Right. Well, it was the scalp that was heard all around the world. Nicola Sturgeon's Born to Fail, Pretendy Ref, was destroyed in the Supreme Court in about 10 minutes. So first of all, let's have a recap. The idea was that Scottish Government went up to the Supreme Court to say, can you tell us whether this is legal or not? But really there's a wider issue at stake, which is not so much the legality of a referendum, but the idea that a devolved administration can have power to make the UK conform to its rules. Now, when you put it that way, it seems different. For example, would you expect that your local council should be able to overturn Brexit ruling? No, of course not. Or could you expect your local council to, ban Trident across the entire UK? No, of course you would not do that. That's David's point, to be honest. I think I stole that one from you. But by the same token, should a regional devolved administration be able to break up the UK? Because they've been very successful in framing this as an issue, the Scottish independence is an issue only for Scots. And when the exact same thing, the breakup of the UK, which it is an issue that affects everyone in the UK. And we heard what Julia Brewer Hartley had to say about that. We've sorted her out. And so we want to get this idea, this idea that the UK government, of course, has primacy on matters. I mean, who can possibly expect that the UK is going to vote to allow itself to be broken up again? You know, it was bad enough the first time. Anyway, so there were three options. David, you can go through the options if you're so inclined. What the three possibilities were?
Right, the three options today. Well, they could have been that. They could have said yes. Well, absolutely, you can have your referendum. That's great. You carry on, guys. The second one would have been no, you can't, and the third would have been, well, let's just throw it back to the Scottish government and let them present their bill, and they'll take a view then. Luckily enough, they didn't do that. They chose instead to reinforce the rule of law, the very clear situation as we all saw it, which is that nope, sorry guys, wasn't to be. And that's, I can't tell you how pleased I was with that, but terrific, very, very, very pleasing indeed.
Yeah, let's have a look at the judgment.
The court unanimously concludes that the proposed bill does relate to reserved matters. Accordingly, in the absence of any modification of the definition of reserved matters by an order in council under section 30 of the Scotland Act or otherwise, the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to legislate for a referendum on Scottish independence.
Well, there you go. We had that wee bit at the end there. All right, so, okay, so, Mary, what's the comments like on this so far?
I'm just reading quite a long comment here. I can put it up, seeing as I've got the space. It's the result she secretly wanted, expected, and hoped for. She'd be like a rabbit in the headlights if the vote went her way. Another couple of years of £200,000 plus, perks and expenses for the Murrells, and 2 further years of blaming the hated Tories.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I
think what's her name, Julia Hartley Brewer, also said something similar. That, you know, she didn't actually want a referendum, but I do think if it is your life's work, that you do want the thing, right? That is the thing you want. She wants to be remembered as a person who took Scotland, into a new, unicorn filmed rainbow adorned land. That's what she wants. And obviously she doesn't want this type of setback, because this setback causes more and more problems for her. Where are we at?
Well, okay. I've got Kathy Upton here who says SNP and supporters are so busy looking outward and not taking any responsibility. If they started looking inwards, they might actually acknowledge what's happening in Scotland.
Well, that's definitely true. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This whole thing is a distraction from the day-to-day issues that we have, and we'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later. But I think for our side, of course, this is an extremely good result. It's not just that it's good in the sense that it's a hard stop, which is what we said. They've come to a hard stop. The judgment itself has no wiggle room. at all. And I thought that there may be a possibility that there would be some kind of long judgment, and then in there they would be able to, the Nationals would sift through to find something, one little glimmer of hope, like the claim of right we talked about last week, even though that's complete nonsense, they hang on to that as well. And so it seems they don't have any path. And another interesting thing was that they said that there was Scotland wasn't a colony. David, what do you think about that part?
This was the most encouraging aspect of the Supreme Court ruling for me. I mean, one person also additionally pointed out that what this means, of course, is that not only can Nicola Sturgeon not present another referendum bill in Holyrood, no government can present another referendum bill in Holyrood. That avenue is now stopped for good. They can't do this again. So that was great. But in terms of the colony thing, the Supreme Court judges were absolutely unequivocal in the ruling, which was terrific. And the great thing is that they went out of their way to mention the fact that the SNP, not this government, but the SNP, had intervened in the proceedings, and they had tried to invoke international law and to say, under international law, we have the right to self-determination. Now, the SNP had used the Quebec referendum as a precedent here, and I don't know if you heard was it Lord Smith saying, we just want to talk about this. The right to self-determination only exists in former colonies or where a people is oppressed or, for example, under foreign military occupation.
Oh, help, I'm oppressed.
Exactly. So this is it. So the judges pointed out that not only did Quebec not meet the threshold of a colonial people, obviously, because it's just a region within, or a city within Canada, nor could it be suggested that Quebecers had been denied meaningful access to government. And the crucial sentence he added was, the same is true of Scotland and the people of Scotland. So it could not be more official now. Scotland is not a colony. It's not occupied by a foreign power. Its people are not denied meaningful access to government. And Scotland's people do not have the right to self-determination under international law on the basis of their trying to break up the country. That is simply...
They've been going on about this all the time. We can go to international court. And I always say to them, well, what court are you going to go to?
Quite.
And they're like, well, they usually run away at that point. Some holdouts might say, the UN is going to do something or other. You're like, the UN isn't going to come and save you. We had a free and fair referendum 8 years ago. They're not going to come and say, you're oppressed and you'll send the white helmets in. It's just not going to happen. But this really puts a nail in that coffin, certainly. Although how many nails are needed in this coffin is a different matter.
We've got Ian McDougall here who says the majority of Scots, including SNP voters, do not want a referendum. Could the Scottish Government please explain the democratic route for that desire to be enacted?
Yeah, quite. Very good point.
Yes, I think that is yes. Well, that is a good point. Where our democratic route is to stop it. Now, the actual democratic route they always say that they're talking about denying democracy all the time, and they're always saying about that. And they do have route. They can get an S30, and they could do that possibly through political action. It is a possibility, but they would need to have consistent high levels of support that they have never really had. And also, you could win a majority in the UK Parliament.
Absolutely.
They'd need a majority of the 650 seats there. But strangely enough, they only run in 59 seats. So, I like to say to people, the tail doesn't wag the dog. You can't expect to have just runs candidates in 59 seats and then think that the UK government will bow to your demands. It's just not reasonable at all.
Indeed.
Right. Oh, okay. So she switched tack. Now, her the cat's mother, as my mum would say, who's she? Nicola Sturgeon switched tack to de facto referendum. Yeah. So apparently there's going to be some kind of SNP conference where they're going to come up with a scheme where they're going to use the next general election, which is within the next 2 years, if I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
That as a referendum. David, any thoughts of that?
Well, this is what she's described as her plan B, if you like. It's really plan C, because the idea was she would get the UK government first off just to say, okay, you can have a referendum. That was plan A. Plan B was let's get the judges to rule on it. That hasn't worked either. So now she's down to the last option, And everybody who's commented on this today has pointed out the folly of it, the fact that it is such a gamble. So what she's saying here is that they would somehow add up all of the votes cast in the next UK general election, and the parties which are purportedly pro-independence, which is the SNP, ALBA, the Greens, probably the Libertarians, not that they're going to get any votes, I don't imagine, but you add them up, all them together, you take that as a fraction of the votes cast, and if it's over 50% of the votes cast, then what? Then what?
Exactly. That's the thing. What happens then?
Exactly. What does it
Going
mean?
to get some cosplay Jacobites in the border with their stray dogs. I mean, really. I mean, what's the art? Where's their army? I mean,
absolutely.
How many armies do they have?
Quite, and this is the thing I've said from the start. This is an enormous gamble. I think it's the biggest blunder she's ever made, because several of the interviewers today pointed out to her that she's never got above 50% in any election. And one point which they will be furious about, of course, is if they, the SNP and the pro-independence parties, are forced to stand or to use the UK general election as the battleground. There's one thing they may have overlooked: 16 and 17-year-olds don't get a vote in a UK general election. So that's a goodly chunk of her votes just gone, because we all know that the young people, she's used impressionable young people to try and bolster her voting figures, and that's not an avenue that's not going to be open to her. So I think that I do believe this is her final throw of the dice. And most of the commentators have presented it as such. Peter Smith and STV has said exactly that. You know, they're really very difficult to see how she could stay on if they fail to get 50%, and I think that's what's going to happen. So I think the next general election will be a real bun fight. But I mean, you know that the Conservative and Labour parties won't say yes, this is our one chance to get rid of them. They won't do that. They'll back away from that. But in the background, they will be doing everything they can, you know, out of sight, to try and make sure that the pro-UK vote gets above 50%. Because if that does happen, then a referendum, de facto referendum, being called by Nicola Sturgeon on her own terms, if she loses that, then she literally has nowhere to go. So
yeah, she's nowhere to go. I think it is a bit of a trap, though, for the pro-UK parties. Basically, under no circumstances should we indulge this idea on our side. Because what they do, we talked about this many times in the show, and talked about Douglas Ross in particular, who wants to make every election into a referendum. And then we all see it every week, every day almost, on Twitter, people saying, yeah, but Douglas Ross said this was going to, it was a referendum, basically, and, you know, you lost it. So where's our vote? So please, Dougie, if you're not watching this, don't do that. That's
exactly.
Not a good idea.
Douglas,
Don't do that.
We're waving
exactly.
Flag,
but on the other side, we should totally enforce it on her side.
Absolutely.
Right? Make her only talk about an independence campaign. And if she stands up and says, all right, well, I want to talk about health, you say, no, this isn't about that. This isn't about health. This is about independence. And then force her to say, well, if we get independence, we'll do that. And then people say, all they just need to do is, you know, like, what's his name? Ronald Reagan. Say, there she goes again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Like that, and that's the way to approach it. Don't even fight the thing that oh yeah, but if you do go independent, you'll get better health, or what. Don't even go there. Just like, we're in the here and now, and we want to deal with people's problems right now. I think people get pretty sick of that fairly soon.
Yeah.
So,
well, I actually think that one of the reasons she's doing this is so that at the next general election, she can just stick to the, you know, all we're going to talk about is, you know, getting another referendum, rather than having to talk about any of the actual issues, so that people won't be able to, she'll be able to cut people off when they try to question her on you know, drug deaths or the national health or actually running the country. That she'll say, oh, the only question that we're running on is whether Scotland should be independent.
I mean, I don't think that worked for them in the past. I think people get very tired of it very quickly. You know, I think it's a big issue now. So we've had some other reactions, of course. It's, you know, they've had the standard reaction. You know, Westminster is denying democracy. Sorry, excuse me, I'm getting maybe big. Westminster is denying democracy. But I think it's important to remind people that it's not Westminster or the English or the Supreme Court that's denied this second referendum. It's the majority of Scots. In fact, it's the Scots who voted for the original devolution settlement and for the Scotland Act. And the Scotland Act says that the UK, the Constitution is reserved, right? And we've said all along, this is just a power grab by Nicola Sturgeon to get power she's not entitled to. She's a local devolved administrator. She's not entitled to try and break up the UK. If she wanted to do that, she should have become an MP and got her support there. So it's hard to take claims of democracy denial seriously from people who deny the result of the 2014 referendum, try to say that Scotland voted against Brexit, say that a vote for them isn't a vote for independence, and then turn around and claim that exactly it is one. They don't like the actual law of the country they live in and engage in constant power grabs. You get into saying this democracy denial, David?
I mean, the democracy denial is just a convenient line for them to use. They trot out the same lines constantly. We have a mandate from last year's election. That's one. Ross Greer even used that today, and Ross Greer said we won a majority. We? What do you mean we? White man, as the joke is. You haven't won anything in your life, boy. You know. So who's he kidding? So this is some twist of or some feat of verbal gymnastics to say that winning 8 seats on the list constitutes winning what was it Blackford called it? A landslide. Blackford called it. They didn't even win a majority, never mind a landslide. So complete nonsense. And the denial of democracy is another one. They're hoping that they can use this to almost galvanise Scots who are maybe soft on the idea into voting for them. But I just can't see it happening, because you saw today when I think it was 6 SNP MPs stood up in Westminster to question Rishi Sunak. They pretty much all said the same thing. I mean, just the same cliches, the same sound bites.
Yeah.
They haven't really got anything other than denial of democracy. We have a mandate. We will not be denied. That's it. That's all they've got to say. And there's nothing in that at all. So it's just yet more spin from the SNP, from an increasingly tired-looking SNP. I have to say.
I think that's very true. They can only say that for so long. That's why I say we should hold Sturgeon to that, because people get tired of it pretty quickly. You know, it's like, you know, we've actually got real problems here to deal with, and you're just banging on about independence. It's like, you know, it's way, way down people's list of priorities. People want to know what's happened to the cost of living crisis, what's happening with the health service just crumbling, and you know, and what's happening with their energy bills and stuff like that. That's what they really want to know about. And exactly as Alan says, there are sound bites all the SNP have, and more exposure of that, the better. Now, the other big nationalist lie is coming up in just a second after this amazing graphic.
Now that's a nice graphic. Anyway. Okay.
Oh, you can tell us all about the biggest one for the week.
Well, indeed I will. So today's big nationalist lie is, we've heard it all day, parroted by enraged nationalists, as it was in the lead up to the ruling and afterwards also. And that lie is, the UK is a voluntary union and we, Scotland, can leave anytime we please. Okay, separatists, if you're tuning in, let me break it to you. No, the UK is not a voluntary union, and no, we can't leave anytime we please. So, throughout today, we've seen and heard countless SNP MPs and MSPs pushing this line. How can it be a union of equals if we can't leave when we choose? Right, so it's very, very simple, this, guys. The UK is not a union of equals, nor is it a voluntary partnership. The UK, or to give it its proper term, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is a country. It's a single unitary state. Now, there are many, many people in various regions of the UK who don't like to be reminded of that fact. And that's primarily, these people primarily, although not exclusively, come from one or maybe two distinct demographic groups in the UK. I don't need to spell out who they are, I think we all know. But these groups are opposed to the UK as a nation state. They're opposed to the concept of the UK as a nation state due to a sense of grievance they hold, or their descendants held against the UK, mainly, again, but not exclusively, because of historical, let's say, military or expansionist events that took place. That's the backdrop to this, okay? Now, there's some sensitivity surrounding this topic, and even possibly some embarrassment among senior politicians. So, to such an extent that you very, very rarely hear MPs even referring to the UK by its full name. There's even a reluctance to fly the Union flag in public buildings in certain regions of the UK. That's the absurd backdrop against which the SNP has come to prominence in Scotland. And this SNP, while it's been in power, even in the lead up, has opportunistically exploited the UK government's reluctance to, if you like, call it as it is, in terms of the UK and Scotland's place within it. And so,
well, I mean, just sorry to clarify something, right?
Sure.
The union part, right, is actually between the Scotland England part, not between Scotland and England. It's between Scotland England combined and Northern Ireland, right?
That's
the union part. So, I mean, basically, we say this to people all the time. It's like the UK isn't a union. It's the result of a union. The union was an event 300 years ago. And it really annoys me when I see some commentators, UK commentators, call the UK the union. They never used to do that. It's basically language that's imported from Northern Ireland. Many Labour supporters do not like being called unionists for obvious reasons, because it conjures up images of Northern Ireland militant Protestant militants with union flags and orange order type stuff. That's the kind of vision that I get from that. And that's what it was intended to do by Alex Salmond and others in the national side who brought that idea in. So we reject the idea. In fact, the very first article I wrote for the majority was, I am not a unionist.
Quite right. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you've actually named one of the demographics to which I was referring. I mean,
it's a truth. It's a truth of the thing.
Absolutely.
Right? There are many people who want to break up the UK. It's not just there is large, people who want both a united Ireland and to break up the UK. That's fair enough. But there are many other people with socialists. That guy, the libertarian who was on that show, he wants to break up the UK state because it would be better somehow if we're all just, governments of single individuals. I mean, but there's, many different motivations. But that still doesn't mean that the UK is a union at all.
Yes, agreed. Absolutely right.
It's such a commonly used term, though, that, I mean, we really do have a lot of work to do to try and overturn that, don't we?
We do indeed. In the last year, I mean, you'll remember, Mary, when we were involved with All for Unity, we went from calling ourselves unionists to calling ourselves a pro-unity party. Because it's true.
Pro-UK.
Unionism is, if you like, it's a nationalist trope. Mark said it's been imported from Northern Ireland by people who are desperate to refight the Irish conflict on Scottish soil. So we have to reject it. We have to, because it's just...
Well, it annoys me particularly when people see people like Stephen Daisley, who writes decent articles, but every single one of them he has planned to save the union this and unionists that, and you're just like, give it a effing rest, will you? Why are you doing that?
Stephen Daisley is the guy. His great... when he wasn't writing the same article 3 times a week, imploring people not to vote for George Galloway, as he did in the lead up to last year's election, he was advocating, guess what? A rewrite of the Act of Union. You just think, my God.
Just leave it alone. But I mean, recently he's been more on side. He's been pushing the Clarity Act. He's been he's talked about banning secession. He come up with this figure that 89% of the world's countries ban secession, right? And the UK is the outlier, and of course that's something that we've been pushing for. Well, not necessarily strongly, but that's something we believe in. That why are we going through all this? We could have a line written in the Scotland Act that says you're not allowed to have. You could have this line written years ago. No referendums on. You're a devolved administration. That's it. Empty the bins.
Absolutely.
That's really the type of thing here, and no calling yourself a government either. That type of nonsense.
This is all Salmond is all over that stuff. It goes back to the efforts he made. I mean, Salmond, take it even further. Salmond openly confessed to seeking out what he called the Catholic vote in Scotland and say, well, we're going to get them. That's true. And he's absolutely unequivocal about this. Fine, all right. Anyway, but today we even saw Nicola Sturgeon. This is how low she's going. She was quoting people 60 years ago referring to the UK as a union. She culminated with her quoting the utterly wretched ex-Prime Minister John Major when he said, no nation can be kept irrevocably in a union against its will. Thanks for that, John. That's very helpful. But this is just the kind of nonsense that they're stooping to, looking desperately, the SNP, for anybody who might agree with their contention that the UK is in some fashion a union. It's not. There
Well,
is
it's also
no
as well
union.
to bring up this idea of the EU. It's easy to leave the EU. Well,
Yes.
so it must be easy to leave the UK as
Exactly.
well. You know,
That's it.
well,
They're trying to equivocate, if you like, leaving the UK with the fact that we've left another union. Absolutely not the case. This is a country, guys. We don't live in a union. We do not live in anything other than a unitary state, a country. The union came about as a result of two acts that took place, firstly in 1603, then in 1707. There was another one in the 1800s, but that's to do with Ireland, not specifically to do with Scotland. But as a result of that union, a country was formed. Not a union. The union took place. It's the past tense. We now live in a country, and this pretense that the UK is not a country but is instead some sort of political union is simply a nationalist ruse intended to undermine the standing of the UK, and as you say, to
well, it's not just the standing; it's to understand it undermines our social ties.
Yep.
It tries to bring the whole argument down to a legalistic one. It's like it's just a piece of paper, right? It's not communities. It's not trade, it's not language, it's not diversity of all the peoples in our country. It's just, oh, yeah, of course you can just cut it. It's easy. It's just easy. Let's just do that. Mary, sorry, you were interrupted you.
Well, I've actually moved on from that comment now, so that's okay. I'll pick another one. Paul Hughes is saying, told family and friends years ago that Scotland will be in the same turmoil as Northern Ireland one day, and it's happening now.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's get quite as bad as that, but it would if we didn't push back. We think we have at the moment we have the upper hand, but we'll see. And thanks to many of the people who are involved in pushing back on this, some of them politicians. Of course, they could be stronger, but we hope that everyone gets a bit more strength as we go along. And this type of ruling now makes it very strong. I've been saying to people for months now, how are you going to get a referendum without an S30? And they go, blah, 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 blah. And they usually run away at the end. Now it's like you have to get an S30 or you have to get a majority in the UK Parliament. That's it.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of the arguments that we've been promoting now come true. Great, thanks for that, David.
Here's a nice comment. Graham says, keep up the good work, guys. Today is the day we roll up our sleeves and mobilise the pro-union vote.
Or even the pro-UK vote. But thanks for the sentiment. The sentiment is correct. So
thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Coming up, Mary's going to tell us about a meeting she went to the other day. It was quite interesting. We'll be back in a second.
Okay, so on Saturday, myself and our colleague Rona Cameron at the Majority, we went to an all-day conference in Glasgow for Education, Not Indoctrination. And the reason we went along is because it kind of falls under our remit as part of our youth outreach programme, where one of our aims is to counter the indoctrination that's going on of our youth. So this event in Glasgow was run by the Scottish Union for Education. Now, they're just getting set up, so they're a new organisation, but they're set up to promote schools and other places of education as places to develop education and subject-based knowledge, rather than as places for the government and education authorities to push their values onto children. Because often those values are at odds with what the parents and the communities believe in or what they want. Do you have that, Mark?
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. What was that one? It's which one here? You wanting the protest article?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. There we go. That's yes. It's protesting the schools.
Yeah. So this is parents who are against some of the things that are going on in schools. So our education establishments are promoting contested ideologies and political causes. Some of the things that they're promoting are like critical race theory that demands that we decolonize the curriculum and promotes a problem of whiteness and white privilege. Things going on in schools are like the new forms of sex education that we've seen with what we've seen with the obscene sex surveys that Scottish school kids are being told to fill in, questioning their sex lives and so on, just these young kids. And also what's being promoted in schools is like gender fluidity.
Yeah.
Transgenderism is being promoted from primary school onwards. In fact, I've even heard it's being promoted in nursery schools.
Oh,
and
young.
This is starting to cause problems. We've seen in recent months with women who feel that their spaces are in danger. So there's quite a few different issues that were talked about and discussed, and they briefly touched on the fact that there's nationalist teaching is creeping into the curriculum as well. So, I mean, guys, we've discussed some of these issues, haven't we?
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit about them, but I mean, it seems like there's the nationalist administration in Scotland seems to have an unhealthy interest in children and young people. Perhaps that's where they see votes coming from or whatever. But they also seem to have a real thing against parents, and they always want to be in between parents. Because, for example, Nicola Sturgeon described herself as the chief mammy, right? Which is a pretty hideous turn of phrase in anything. But also they did named person scheme, which failed. And they've had this constant, as you say, indoctrination in schools, the sex survey just being one, hideous example. Just really terrible. There are some great groups working on this around, Glasgow Cabby is one, I think. Are you going to talk about this?
He was there. I'm going to mention him.
Right.
Well, one of the things you did mention there was about the named person scheme. So there was a guy there from the Christian Institute, and he was a really good speaker, and they were actually the organisation that stopped the named person.
Right.
All that, trying to put somebody in place of the parent. Somebody would be able to deal with your kids' issues rather than you as a parent. So he was really good, and they spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on getting that repealed and stopped. So that was good. And some of the other things you just mentioned about there. So basically, what was being said at this conference was that in education these days, what's going on is a type of social engineering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what was actually said was, when it comes to the politicisation of the curriculum, Scotland is at the forefront of turning education into a form of mass social engineering. Mm-hmm. So we're moving away from education that perhaps, that we were lucky enough to still have when we were young, where we were taught subjects and it was all about your subject knowledge. And now when teachers are being trained, they're not really being trained in depth about their subjects. They're being trained in psychology. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, how to deal with pupils in terms of psychology, about making them feel validated and about raising their self-esteem. It's not so much about actually teaching them the subject.
Well, this comment says, well, why don't the teachers push back against this disgraceful manipulation of school children? Surely they can't all support this rubbish.
Well, that was discussed at the conference, and there were actually, somebody had written a letter to the conference, a teacher, and there were a lot of teachers and educators there, and they were saying that they want to. They're being given, stuff from the government. So some of the teachers were saying that when they received the packs with the information in it, some of them just put them straight in the bin. Because it's actually up to the school, or it's up to the local authorities and the schools to decide what they're actually going to teach in the classroom. But of course, a lot of the teachers are too scared, to do that, or they agree with these things that are being taught in the schools, and so they don't want to do that. But the overall thing that's very, very important is that what's happening is that young people are being taught to reject the values of their parents and grandparents and all the people that came before them. So the parents aren't being involved. They're actually being excluded.
Yeah.
And the teachers are acting like what are called corporate parents. So they've basically trying to educate the correct values that they don't feel that the parents are teaching the children. So it's not an open education, it's closer to political indoctrination.
Well, Mr. Tommy Boy there said, let kids be kids. And Catherine here says, to give you a little bit of praise here. Well, oops, wrong one. Well done, Mary. Great initiative. So, did you get anything else from there? Did you meet anyone else interesting?
Yeah, well, it was very interesting. Just briefly, they touched on identity politics is closely linked to national identity as well. So you're trying to mess with people's national identity is all part of identity politics. I think that's something I'd like to look into a little bit more. But there was a lot of really good people there. Glasgow Cabby that you mentioned earlier, Mark, he was there. Steph Shaw. and said that we'd invite him on the show soon, which would be good. And if
Okay, that's
you remember last week I was talking about the lady who got thrown out of Holyrood for wearing the suffragette scarf. Well, she was there, so I had a good chat with her. Also, we had Alan and Regina Sutherland and Maggie Openshaw. They were down from Scotland Matters. They're based in Aberdeen, but they drove down and back in the same day for the event. I met Marion Calder from Women Scotland.
Yeah, so that's the lady here who got this one here. This is her.
No, that's Anne-Marie Ward.
Oh, sorry, that's Anne-Marie Ward. You're right. Sorry, sorry about that.
Anne-Marie Ward from Favour UK was there. She works for people who are suffering and recovering from addiction. And quite rightly there, Mark, she was in the news this week for throwing out an SNP counsellor at a drugs death meeting because she said he'd only turned up for the photo op.
I have to say that is a great photo.
Well done.
So, well done, Anne-Marie. She's great. Yeah, she's really good. But guys, we've kind of talked about indoctrination and different things in schools, universities, and so on. And we know that there's nationalist indoctrination going on as well, right?
Well, it's just part of the whole thing. It's that whole thing. Get the children, on our side, and then they'll always be on their side. What's the theory, right? So they do it, as I say, they have an unhealthy obsession with children. They need to be leaving children alone, and they need to be given. They always talk about safe spaces and all this type of stuff. Like, why don't they ever give children safe spaces to learn and not be involved in this? It's really not very right. So,
well, actually, there's another thing that I haven't mentioned yet. That what I found really surprising, actually, the guy from the Christian Institute, he talked about how actually under the law, all of these things are forbidden. The parents are supposed to be, under the law, the parents are supposed to be at the heart of children's education.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be consulted about everything. But that's basically just not happening. So it's not a matter of changing any laws or anything, because all the laws are already on the side of parents and against indoctrination. But basically the law is just not being followed.
Yeah, that was a great comment there for Tricky Mickey. We're sitting here watching the show. I think it's a great day to be a Scot in the United Kingdom. Well, there's still many issues that we have to fix and have to deal with. I mean, stopping IndyRef is only part of our mission. Our mission is to stop nationalism, toxic Scottish nationalism. That is a disease. Everything else is a symptom, right? All this scandals, incompetence, all that, all flows naturally from Scottish nationalism. This thing with the children, it's exactly the same. It comes from the idea that it centralise children's education and into this idea that they will be part of this state with a chief mammy. It's a hideous idea, really, and that we should need to our work will continue. Even if they said there's no IndyRef 2 ever going to happen again, that's not the end. The end for us is when we have eradicated this toxic, greedy, divisive nationalism from Scotland. It was a great segment there, Mary. Thank you very much for going to the meeting. And it's good that we made contact with so many other groups.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of people working on this, and we don't do everything. But we can hopefully highlight some of their work, and they can work with us as well. Right. Okay. It's coming up. It's not coming up yet. It will come up in a second. But things you can do right now to support the show. You can make a monthly donation, £5 a month, please. So it's not even a cup of coffee. Please put that.
It's a cup of coffee.
Well, a cup of coffee and a half. It depends where you go for your coffee, right?
Did you have a biscuit with it?
Really, how much does having people fight for you mean to you? I mean, it should be something. So if you can, anyway, times are tough, but please, if you can, put £5 in every month. It'd be really help. You can buy a T-shirt or a mug, and you can subscribe to the show. But if you can't do any of all that, just tell your friends about us. Yeah. We're here every Wednesday, and we're having a laugh and discussing the issues of the day, and we enjoy being here with you and your comments and stuff like that. So it's our one chance to vent and to discuss things, because no other show is like this. And if you can do every one of those things, that would be great. We should send you a badge or something like that. Right, coming up, it's a highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week. Right, turns out it's me first. So my Zoomer of the week is Joanna Cherry, because she thought up this wheeze in the first place. Now I've got to find this in the National, by the way, which is a paper that now has no reason to exist.
Yeah.
Please close it down and stop the division it causes. She said, watching matters unfold, and this article's ridiculous. She says here, this is on the 1st of July, Indy Ref 2 Supreme Court battle is a win-win for Scottish Government. Yeah, sure. Right. She says, anyway, watching the announcement on Tuesday has been hugely satisfying. I hope I can be forgiving for finding it particularly sweet. 2 reasons. First, it's gratifying, as well as the relief that the strategy for which I have long advocated is now part of the Scottish Government's plan. By that, I mean that if the Supreme Court rules in our favour, then we have a legal referendum, which unionists will find hard to boycott. No, we wouldn't. And the result of which the UK government and the international community will recognise. No, they won't. And then she says losing the case could actually increase support for a second independence referendum, as well as independence itself. Now, wait a minute here. I have a picture here of the protest, not a couple hours ago here, and made the comment that the picture, it's so cropped. The crowd is so huge they've had to crop it to get everyone in. Right? Look at this huge crowd, not a huge crowd at all. And that's supposed to be their that's what we're up against. I don't think this is a serious movement anymore at all. But I do want to show, while I'm on Joanna, I do want to talk about this. I've got a wee clip actually of her this in the House of Parliament today. So what was she saying here? This is actually quite good, because wait till the end. There's a bit of guff, but then wait till the end.
The United Kingdom Supreme Court have answered a legal question this morning, not a political one. And the lesson of history is that a nation's exercise of its right to self-determination can be delayed, but not denied. So, can the Right Honourable Gentleman answer the question that the Prime Minister could not or would not answer? And it's this: if people living in Scotland continue to elect a majority of pro-independence MSPs and MPs who support a second independence referendum, what is the democratic route to realising that mandate?
Well, as I've pointed out before, it is not the case that a majority of the Scottish electorate have voted for independent supporting parties.
She actually put that up as a positive, right? Somehow, I don't know why she did that. She's like, here's my, thing about democracy and all that and majorities, and, Alistair Jack just shoots it down straight away. I was kind of surprising that she would put that. Anyway, whatever. Zoomer.
They've been saying so many things for so long that they just get away with. People just accept. And that's one of them. So she probably didn't expect that to be questioned.
Well, I mean, she boasts about being the architect of this plan. Well, she hasn't mentioned that she was the architect of this plan, I don't think, in the recent tweets. But this was the thing she was really pushing for. And they have these people making these plans up. Wings for Scotland's another one. The whole plebiscite thing comes from Wings Over Scotland. Yeah. And he's kind of tried to backtrack and say, well, actually, it was supposed to be a Scottish election that would be the plebiscite election, right? Used instead of a referendum. Not that helps, because it could just still be equally as ignored. And these ideas, which seem actually quite extreme, are filtering through into the mainstream SNP consciousness, as it were. And the reason they are is because they don't have anything else. They don't have, a proper plan to get a referendum. They had a referendum and lost, and so they're scrabbling around the dirt for whatever they can, and they're going to try out increasingly bizarre ideas over the next while. And what we have to do is just mock them and just say they're nonsense and not indulge them too much.
Call them out.
Yeah, and call them out for it. I think that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. Was it Karen there? You really need to be called out over these ludicrous claims. I mean, it's totally correct. It's just, utterly nonsense. No, democracy isn't being denied. You denied democracy. The UK isn't a union that can easily be broken. It's one country, and whatever the other one is, the flavour of the day that they have. It just goes on and on and on. We have to keep pushing back. But I think more and more we'll see that people will be people will see there's extreme nutters on this side. Yeah. And they're the flag wavers and all that, and they can never get enough of them, right? Because they're just not big enough. And what Sturgeon's been able to do is put this kind of managerial class in, who like the idea, who are either being paid by her, in the sense that she's opened all these quangos and opened all. She gives gifts, using UK money to for benefits or for jobs and stuff like that. That group at some point has to say, well, are we actually getting? Are we getting a good deal out of this? And I think increasingly they're going to say, well, we're not actually getting a good health service at all. We're not going to get this. If we're not getting independence, what are we actually getting? That's a big question. Anyway.
Rita Johnson is asking, and I don't know if we've got much time, but of course for Rita we'll try. We sit back and wait for Sturgeon's next move. Is there anything the majority can do to be proactive? Well, we need to think about that, guys, don't we?
Well, I think we're always on and trying to get ahead of the curve for whatever's going to come up. I mean, for example, we talked about this plebiscite election. We knew this was coming up a long time ago because we'd seen that, and it's kind of surprising when it did come up. But then you can try and plan for it. The next thing we've got is, as I said, de facto referendum. How are we going to deal with that? And so we are actually talking with other groups about how to deal with that, and trying to, get a combined strategy for that.
One thing I think it will necessitate, Rita, is the opposition parties in Scotland have got to get real. And when I say the opposition parties, I include the Scottish Conservatives. In fact, I would say fundamentally the Scottish Conservatives have got to get real. They've got to stop this idea that they can field candidates in each of the 73 constituencies and expect to win. They're not going to win. They've got a completely tired offering. It's never going to appeal to the massive Scottish people. We've got to demand it of them. That's the first step for me to convincing the SNP. I think that's right. Yeah, well, there's a lot in there, but anyway, yeah.
A lot of what we do is bolstering our side and trying to say, we're not too concerned about getting new converts. I mean, that's great, but what we really want to do, and the reason we set up the majority, was to make ourselves feel strong first of all. And, feel that we've got strength. And I think we've been able to do that in combination with other groups, of course, as well. And to try, I think we're in a much, much stronger position than we were before. So it's good. We'll do what we can. And thank you for your support. That was my Zoomer. Coming up is Joanna. Next is coming up is David.
It's me. This gentleman is not new to the accolade of Zoomer of the Week. It's John Nicholson, SNP MP, whose reaction to today's ruling was very, very telling. He's been on the BBC throughout today, looking like the proverbial little boy who's been sent to his bedroom with no supper. He first appeared in Politics Live at lunchtime, in which he sneered openly at Conservative MP Catherine Fletcher and Labour's Barry Gardiner. Miss Fletcher actually pointed out rightly that the Scottish independence issue has already been resolved in 2014. Scottish people now want their government to focus on priorities. And she added with real feeling that she spent a lot of time in the northwest of England and in Scotland, and that she loves the Scottish people. Have you got this clip, Mark, that shows John?
Yes, I have.
The problem with the NHS, there's a cost of living crisis, is a war in Ukraine. Their own polling shows that they're just continuing to push ideological stuff at the expense of the Scottish people. And winning elections. And I love the Scottish people. I'm from the northwest of England. I've worked in Edinburgh. I've worked in Glasgow.
That was John Nicholson's reply, with the biggest sneer you've seen all day, to a Conservative MP saying, "I love the Scottish people." He said, "Oh, how kind." Oh,
right. Good faith, David.
And then in the afternoon, he appeared in the Scottish Politics show, where he said, "As we all know, that every party went into last year's Scottish elections on the understanding that a win for the SNP would mean another referendum." No, we didn't.
No, that's absolutely rubbish.
For example. Exactly. We stood for election last year. Mary, were you standing on the basis that a win for the SNP would mean another referendum? I know I wasn't.
No, because the SNP told me that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon said that
Nicola
herself.
said directly that wasn't the
Yeah,
case.
got tons of at least 2 videos and multiple news articles about that.
Exactly, saying a vote for me is not necessarily a vote for
of course.
independence, which of course she's backtracked on ever since. The only person who did, as you said, Mark, was the great Douglas Ross, who's saying, vote Conservative to stop the SNP getting a referendum.
Please don't do that anymore.
Oh, God.
Drive me daft.
Oh, exactly. But anyway, just to say throughout today, Nicholson looked rattled and angry, and that, be clear, is exactly how SNP senior figures are feeling. They might be putting on a brave show, saying, "Oh, it's better to lose. This is what we really needed." Forget it. They are absolutely pieces after losing this.
No, it's a disaster, a complete disaster for them.
Yep.
It really is. Okay, well, I know we're running a little bit over time. We'll finish in a few minutes. So if you want to stay with us, that's fine, Mary. You don't need to go too fast. But it's your Zoomer coming up.
Okay, well, I know I'm onto a winner here, and I don't have to say much. My Zoomer of the week is Nicola Sturgeon.
Oh,
right, okay, yes.
So today there is a great article in the Telegraph from Tom Harris. Do you have that, Mark?
Oh, yes, I do have it. Here it is. Here,
Please put it up
yes,
for me.
this one here.
Hold on a second. Okay.
This is a crucial milestone in Scotland's history and a humiliation for Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah, exactly. So what he's saying that Nicola Sturgeon has spent too much time and money on getting some highly paid and highly respected judges to read the Scotland Act. And couldn't she just have read it herself?
Yes, well, that's a good
point. He said, in fact, all it takes is a glance. And if you can't even do that, you can go to Holyrood's website and look under what cannot be decided by the Scottish Parliament, and it would tell you clearly there. Right. So why did she waste all this time and money going through this whole palaver when it was always extremely clear what the decision, should be, because it's very clear in the Scotland Act. He points out that, of course, that she knew this because she's a lawyer and she's been working in nationalist politics for years. Mm-hmm. So she always knew that was going to be the outcome. And anyone who'd read the Scotland Act or looked at the website or whatever, everyone knew that should be. Well,
it literally takes 30 seconds to read it. Yeah. I mean, really, it's so simple. You think, oh, this is an act of Parliament. It's going to be, reams and reams of paper or whatever, reams. I'm going to have to be dense. It's very, very straightforward. In fact, Lord Reid did a very good summation of the thing. His delivery of what the issue was and the judgment was just perfect, I thought, as well.
But in the meantime, we've got to go through all the, a lot more shenanigans. We've got more never-ending, more grievance, more division. And all the while, services in Scotland are in severe decline and people are suffering. So Nicola is my Zoomer of the week.
Right. Okay. Well, it turns out it is my turn to decide, and I'm just going to make it very simple. Of course, it has to be. There is no doubt about it. Amongst all of the Zoomers, Nicola Sturgeon stands out. She took this case knowing it was bound to fail. We still have to see what legal advice she got. If she got legal advice that she said it was going to fail, then, I mean, she basically forced Dorothy Bain to go up there and make a fool of herself. And where is her Bain's resignation? That should be coming. And
how much is all this costing?
Well, and then how much is all it costing? How much time is it taking up? And so on. So I think, Mary, it's a well-deserved win.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Anyone who'd put up Nicola Sturgeon, it was definitely a win.
Yes. So, okay. Yeah. Right, we're going to close up. We will be back with another show next Wednesday, November 30th, which is St Andrew's Day. Our usual time of 7 p.m.
Wonderful. So thank you to UK Union Voice and to United Against Separation and to all the other pages that support us. Much appreciated, guys.
It's very good. And if you can, please go to a donate page, pledge $5 £10 monthly donation. It'll be a huge help to us. Every little donation builds up and helps us amplify your voice for 2023.
And thank you to everyone for your comments. I'm still trying to put them up as I speak. There's been tons of comments, a lot more people tuning in tonight as well. It's been a great show. Thank you, everyone.
I will leave you with the thought of the week. Today was another day where Nicola Sturgeon, every SNP MP and MSP were allowed to get away with not talking about health, education, and the cost of living crisis. Let's hope today is the beginning of the end of the never-ending. We can live in hope. It's good night from me.
Good night
Good
from
night,
me.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you all for
next
seeing
week.
us, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.